Awaken your spirit, chosen one. You were never just a background character in this world. You were never just a quiet face in the crowd. They thought you were the mouse, small, timid, harmless. But the truth, you were the storm behind the silence. A quiet thunder waiting for divine timing to strike. They laughed at your stillness. They mistook your calm for fear, your patience for weakness, and your humility for powerlessness. But you were never powerless. You were strategic. You were observing, absorbing, learning, while they exposed their true selves. While they underestimated you, heaven was preparing your elevation. They thought you were soft, but you were steel wrapped in grace. They thought they could walk over you, talk down to you, play with your name, and disrespect your boundaries. But now the game has flipped. Now they're seeing you for what you've always been, the real boss in town. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was sacred. Your solitude wasn't punishment, it was preparation. You didn't shrink because you lacked courage. You shrank to fit the room, knowing you wouldn't be there forever. You dimmed your light, not because you weren't bright enough, but because they weren't ready for your fire. But now, that flame can't be contained. That voice they tried to ignore now echoes with power. That energy they tried to suppress now demands reverence. You're not the underdog, you're the overcomer. You've been cloaked in mystery, hidden in plain sight, covered by divine hands until the appointed hour. And now that hour has arrived. You're no longer waiting to be seen. You are the vision. You're no longer hoping to be heard. Truth is the trumpet. You're not here to beg for seats at tables. You are the table. And they know it now. They feel it in your presence. The same ones who rolled their eyes at you now lower their voices when you walk into the room. The same ones who questioned your worth now imitate your moves. The same ones who thought they could play you now study you like scripture, trying to decode how you became untouchable. And that's the twist, isn't it? They had power over you when you didn't even know your own. But once you woke up, once you accepted who you are, the entire power structure collapsed. And here's the deeper truth. They never had power over you at all. They only had access. And now that access has been revoked, if this power inside you hadn't been protected, it would have been corrupted. If your voice had been too loud too soon, it would have attracted the wrong attention. That's why God kept you hidden. That's why your brilliance was covered. That's why your roar was a whisper for a season. Because timing matters, preparation matters, and divine order doesn't rush. You weren't being overlooked. You were being preserved, held back so you could be launched forward with force. What you carry is dangerous to the dark. You're not just someone who's been through trials. You're someone who learned from them, grew through them, and now walks with wisdom that can't be taught in books. You didn't fold. You forged. You didn't break. You built. You didn't quit. You quietly became everything they swore you could never be. And now they're waking up to the reality that the one they doubted is the one they now fear. Not because you're evil, not because you're vengeful, but because they realize they were blind. And now your light exposes everything they tried to hide. Chosen one, this world doesn't need more noise. It needs divine authority. It needs quiet storms that rise with purpose. It needs souls like yours, bold enough to be soft, strong enough to stand alone, and wise enough to know when to speak and when to move in silence. So if you know this message is for you, if you feel that fire waking up in your spirit, like this video, subscribe and comment below with "They didn't see me coming" to join this journey. Because you're not just rising, you're reclaiming. You're not the quiet mouse anymore. You're the voice they can't ignore. You were never meant to blend in, chosen one. You were never born to tiptoe around your own power or apologize for the weight you carry in the spirit. From the moment you entered this world, heaven had already whispered your name into the atmosphere, marked you for impact, for disruption, for divine transformation. But the world didn't know that, and they couldn't see it. They saw you as ordinary. They labeled you quiet, passive, easy to control. What they didn't realize was that you were a quiet storm-building power in silence, a lion disguised in lamb's clothing. They mistook your stillness for weakness, but God was only preparing your roar. They called you the quiet one, the one who wouldn't speak up, the one who always kept the peace, and for a while maybe you even believed it. You kept your head down. You kept your thoughts to yourself. You tried to be small enough to fit into their comfort zones, not realizing that you were never created to be small. You are the explosion hidden inside the whisper. You are the earthquake behind the calm. You are the voice of thunder wrapped in gentleness, waiting, watching, preparing. They laughed when you didn't fight back. They assumed silence was surrender. But silence is sacred. Silence is strength. A true warrior knows when to be still and when to strike. You were not quiet because you were weak. You were quiet because you were wise, because your spirit understood that some battles are won in stillness. Some wars are handled in secret between you and the Most High, and now they're realizing they miscalculated. The quiet one has become the commander. The one they overlooked is now the one they can't overlook. It was never about being loud. It was about being true. And what is true can't be denied forever. When God anoints someone, no amount of slander, gossip, exclusion, or manipulation can erase that mark. They tried. Oh, they tried to silence you. They tried to distort your image. They tried to make you question your own worth. But something inside you refused to die. Even when your heart was breaking, your spirit kept whispering, I am more. Even when they tried to bury you, you remembered. You're not soil, you're seed, and now the growth is undeniable. Now your roots are too deep, your branches too wide. The same mouths that once mocked you now stammer in your presence. The same eyes that rolled in your direction now look away in shame. Because you showed up, you stood in who you are. You stopped hiding, you stopped playing small. You stopped pretending you weren't chosen. They thought you were the mouse, scurrying around, avoiding confrontation. But now they see you were the eagle, silent in the sky, unbothered, focused, sovereign. You didn't need to announce your power, you embodied it. And when the time came, you descended. You moved with precision, you moved with truth. And the atmosphere shifted. There is power in restraint, there is strength in stillness, but eventually even the quiet storm must be heard, and that's what's happening now. You are no longer silent, you are no longer hiding behind fear or shame or the desire to be accepted by people who never had the capacity to understand you. You're no longer watering yourself down to make others comfortable. You're no longer letting their discomfort keep you in a box. You were made to be misunderstood. You were created to stand out. And while others played checkers, you were being taught to play chess, seeing 10 moves ahead, watching, learning, letting the noise expose the foolery. And now the board has shifted. The game is yours to win, and the silence they mocked has become your most powerful move. They thought you were weak because you walked away from chaos, because you didn't argue, because you didn't try to prove your worth to people who already made up their minds. But walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Protecting your peace is warfare. And choosing to rise instead of retaliate is what separates the divine from the distracted. God didn't call you to defend your name. God called you to live your truth. He called you to outgrow the lies, to elevate past the drama, to embody a level of grace they can't imitate. And when you did that, when you chose alignment over attention, everything began to change, not just externally, but spiritually. The heavens moved, the atmosphere responded, and those who once tried to define you now find themselves confused by the power you walk in. That's what divine timing looks like. It's not always dramatic, it's not always loud. Sometimes it's hidden growth, quiet awakenings, silent strength. Sometimes the biggest transformation happens while no one's watching, until suddenly everyone has to notice. And now they're noticing, Now they see the shift in your posture, the clarity in your voice, the fire in your eyes, and it makes them uncomfortable because it exposes everything false in them. You didn't change for attention. You aligned with your anointing. You stepped into the fullness of who you've always been. And in doing so, you reminded the world that real power doesn't need to boast. It simply is. But don't expect applause. Don't wait for validation. The same people who underestimated you are now the ones trying to figure out how to recover from misjudging someone so deeply connected to divine truth. They don't know how to handle it because you don't fit their categories anymore. You're not predictable. You're not manipulatable. You're not afraid to be seen in your fullness anymore, and that terrifies them. You've become a mirror. Now, chosen one, just by standing in your light, you reflect back the shadows they tried to deny. Your truth is loud even when your mouth is closed. Your presence disrupts what they tried to keep hidden. That's the weight of divine presence. That's the cost of being chosen, but with that weight comes freedom. You no longer need to shrink to be safe. You no longer have to dim your glow to make others feel secure. You no longer need to over-explain your silence or justify your fire. You are the storm and the shelter. You are the peace and the sword. You are the prophecy and the proof. They thought you were done, but God was just getting started. They thought your silence meant defeat, but your silence was the stillness before the rise. And now you walk with a clarity that doesn't need permission. You move with a purpose that doesn't require applause. You know who you are now, and there's no going back. This world tried to convince you that being chosen meant being liked, but the truth, being chosen often means being alone. It means being misunderstood, rejected, overlooked, until suddenly you're undeniable, until suddenly you show up and they can't explain the glow, the grace, the authority. You stopped begging for approval and became the standard. You stopped chasing connection and became the source. You stopped asking to be heard. And now, your silence speaks louder than their noise ever could. And it's not about vengeance. It's about revelation. God is revealing who you are, not just to them, but to you. You needed the wilderness to realize your power. You needed the silence to develop your voice. You needed the rejection to understand your value. And now you are walking into rooms where your name was once mocked, and you are commanding respect without saying a word, because that's what happens when heaven endorses you. That's what happens when divine timing aligns. That's what happens when you stop trying to fit into roles never meant for you and start embodying the one God created specifically for you. You're not just stepping into destiny. You are the destiny. You're not just walking in power. You are the power. And anyone who tried to dim your light is about to witness your rise. Not because you forced it, but because it was always written. You're the real boss in town, not through dominance, but through divine authority, not through fear, but through faith. And now you shine without shame, you lead without noise, and you reign in silence, just like God intended. You walk into a room now and everything feels different. The energy shifts. The air thickens with awareness. People pause, not always out of admiration, but out of uncertainty. Not because you've become arrogant, but because you've become undeniable. Your presence has weight now, not the kind that drags or burdens, but the kind that anchors, the kind that makes others question who they are around you, because they can no longer pretend not to see what's glowing from within you. You are no longer the person they could ignore, no longer the one who had to over-explain your worth. You've stepped into an identity that speaks louder than words ever could. There's something about divine growth that doesn't need to scream. It doesn't beg. It doesn't push. It just is. It radiates. It expands without trying. And that's exactly what you've become, a living expansion of truth, of power, of sacred purpose. You carry a divine frequency now, one that makes some people feel inspired and others feel exposed. And that's not your fault. That's not your burden. That's just the consequence of authenticity. You see, when you finally stop shrinking to survive, you begin to command space without even trying, not by force, but by alignment. And what people don't understand, they fear, they mock, they resist, but it doesn't matter anymore because you're not here to make everyone comfortable. You're here to make truth visible. You're here to flip the old systems, to break down the invisible walls of conformity and fear and control. You're here to interrupt what's been fake for far too long. That's not rebellion, it's revelation. You were born to flip the script, to challenge every narrative that told people they had to stay small, silent, or safe. And that includes the story they tried to write for you. They had a plan for where you should stay, how you should act, what role you should play. But something in your soul refused to fit in. Something in you kept pulling away from the scripts, the expectations, the limits. And now you know why. Because you were never meant to be a pawn. You were born to flip the board. This world needs people like you, people who've tasted darkness but chose light anyway, people who've been broken but still walk with compassion, people who carry wounds but refuse to let those wounds bleed on others. That's you. You carry wisdom now. You carry authority that only comes through surviving what others couldn't even speak about. You've become a living contradiction to every lie they told you. And now, your existence alone is a revolution. But let's make this clear. Just because you don't yell doesn't mean your voice isn't powerful. Just because you don't fight the way they do doesn't mean you're not a warrior. You've just learned how to master your energy, how to hold your peace and let it speak for you. You've learned that sometimes silence is sharper than any sword, and stillness can cut deeper than any insult. That's spiritual maturity. That's the mark of someone who's been trained by fire, but shaped by God. You walk differently now, not because you're trying to prove something, but because you have nothing left to prove. Your confidence isn't rooted in ego. It's rooted in survival, in revelation, in the quiet knowing that no matter what they try, you'll rise again. Not because you're lucky, but because you're anointed, and no one can take from you what God has placed within you. Not lies, not rejection, not envy, nothing. They thought they broke you, but all they did was build you, brick by brick, test by test. Shadow by shadow, you rose through it all. And that kind of strength can't be faked, it can't be copied, it can't be bought. You earned that, you lived that, and now it walks with you like armor. Not to make you hard, but to remind you that softness and strength were never enemies. People see the glory, but they don't know the cost. They don't know the nights you cried in silence, the moments you questioned your worth, the years you felt invisible. They see the crown now, but they don't know how many tears it's made of. And that's okay. They don't need to know, because what you carry isn't for show, it's for impact, for divine assignment, for sacred purpose. And now, something deeper is happening. Now the veil is being lifted, not just over their eyes, but over yours. You're seeing who you are more clearly. You're embracing what you used to hide. You're no longer apologizing for the way you move, the way you speak, the way you see the world. You're no longer shrinking around people who confuse your clarity for cockiness. You're no longer wasting energy trying to be accepted by places you've already outgrown, because here's the truth. Your rise was never meant to be comfortable. Your elevation was never going to come with universal applause. Some people benefited from your silence. Some people were empowered by your doubt. So when you stepped into who you really are, it shook their world. It exposed their motives. It made them confront the uncomfortable truth that the version of you they controlled is gone forever. And now they're left trying to figure out how to relate to the real you, the one who sees, who discerns, who no longer tolerates what doesn't align. And that's not your problem. That's their reckoning. Your responsibility now is to stay aligned, stay clear, stay connected to the source that's been guiding you all along. Because this isn't just about you anymore. Your light is making room for others to wake up. Your power is breaking generational patterns. Your voice is unlocking doors for people you don't even know yet. That's the ripple effect of walking in truth. That's the legacy of a chosen one. They might not say it out loud, but they feel it. When you walk in, the energy shifts, not because you demand attention, but because your presence is the shift. You don't have to perform anymore. You just have to be. Be consistent. Be authentic. Be led by the Spirit, not by fear. Be the example that faith can look like boldness, that grace can look like fire, that softness can hold divine force. You were never supposed to fit in. You were meant to lead. But not in the way the world defines leadership. Not through control or performance, but through presence, through alignment, through the way you live, the way you love, the way you honor your calling, even when no one claps for it. That's power, that's legacy, that's what makes you the real boss. Not the volume of your voice, but the vibration of your spirit. And yes, it can be lonely at times. Being chosen often means walking roads others are afraid to take. It means saying no when others say yes. It means holding your ground when everything around you says compromise. But you've learned what you don't compromise for, you gain authority over. And you've gained spiritual authority now. Not just over situations, but over the atmosphere, over generational patterns, over everything that once tried to hold you down. This is what divine transformation looks like. Not perfect, not polished, but pure, rooted, unshakable. And the beauty of it is, you don't even need to explain it anymore. You just live it. You just walk in it. And let your life do the talking. Because now, when you enter a room, you don't have to announce who you are. The atmosphere already knows. The frequency already shifts. The spirits already respond, not because of who you think you are, but because of who heaven knows you are. And that knowing, that sacred awareness of your purpose, your power, your presence, that's what sets you apart. That's what keeps you rising when others fall. That's what keeps you grounded when chaos surrounds you. That's what makes you chosen. So keep walking with your head high, not in arrogance, but in alignment. Keep moving in silence when necessary, and speak only when your words carry truth. Keep protecting your peace like it's holy ground, because it is. Keep honoring your growth even when others don't understand it. Keep shining even when it blinds those who once tried to dim you. You are the real boss in town, not because you shouted it, but because you lived it. And now the world has no choice but to recognize what heaven ordained from the beginning. You were never just the quiet one. You were always the storm dressed in stillness, the leader hidden in the background, the warrior wrapped in gentleness. And now the time for hiding is over. Now is the time to own it, to walk in it, to be it. Because this world needs what only you can give. Not the watered-down version, not the masked version, but the real you, the healed you, the bold you, the anointed you. So rise, chosen one, not tomorrow, not when it's convenient, not when they approve. Rise now, rise fully, rise boldly, because your time is not coming, it's here. And you were made for this. There's something sacred about being misunderstood, chosen one. Something holy in the way God allowed you to be misread, misjudged, and mistaken for less than you truly are. It wasn't to break you. It was to build something deeper in you. Being misunderstood was never a punishment. It was part of the process. A spiritual strategy to protect what was still being formed inside of you. Because if they had known who you truly were, if they had seen even a glimpse of the divine force God placed within you, they would have tried to destroy it too early. They would have wrapped it in jealousy, tried to smother it in doubt, or distracted you with counterfeit affirmation. But heaven said no. Heaven wrapped your calling in silence, your identity in shadows, and your power in stillness, not to hide you forever, but to grow you in the secret place, so that when you emerged, you wouldn't just appear, you'd arrive. With authority, being misunderstood gave you room to transform. It gave you the space to evolve without being dissected. You were left out, but you were never left behind. You were hidden, but never forgotten. Because God knew, if you were going to carry something this heavy, it had to be developed in silence. The kind of silence that breaks pride. The kind of silence that deepens your discernment. The kind of silence that teaches you how to hear the whisper of God when no one else is listening. And now the very people who misread you are realizing they never knew you at all. They only knew the version of you that was still becoming, the version that played it small, the version that kept peace at the expense of your own power. But that version was never your final form. That was just the cocoon, the sacred shell. And now the butterfly is here, and you're not asking for understanding anymore. You've learned to be okay with being misunderstood because you now understand yourself. That's power. When your identity is no longer dependent on others. Perception. When your peace no longer relies on their approval. When you can walk away from confusion without needing to explain your clarity. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. That's what happens when you realize God allowed the misunderstanding to save you from spiritual contamination. You were set apart for a reason. You don't look like everyone else. You don't move like everyone else, and you're not supposed to. You were wired for something higher, structured for something deeper, and because of that, your story had to be different. Your training had to be harder. Your silence had to last longer. And now you get it. You see why things didn't make sense then, but feel divinely aligned now. The confusion around you wasn't a curse. It was a cover. And now that the veil is lifting, they're being forced to see what they missed. The misfit was actually the masterpiece. The black sheep was always the blueprint. The rejected one was the real reflection of what they feared. Because you've become what they could never control, what they couldn't predict, what they couldn't manipulate with flattery or fear, and you've done it without bitterness. Without vengeance. You rose with grace. You evolved in silence. You didn't clap back. You healed. You didn't chase explanations. You embodied truth. And now, your existence alone disrupts everything false in their world. Chosen one, you are a living contradiction to their expectations. And that's the point. You were never meant to fit the mold. They were meant to break when they tried to contain you. You were designed to be the holy exception, the divine curveball, the one they underestimated until heaven showed them who you really are. And now the world has to answer to the real you. They don't get to rewrite your story anymore. They don't get to water down your identity to make themselves feel comfortable. They don't get to frame you through the lens of who you used to be. That chapter is over. The illusion is gone. You're no longer the whisper in the room. You're the voice that can't be denied. Because the real you walks with clarity. You walk with conviction. You walk with a presence that requires no introduction. You don't just show up anymore. You shift the atmosphere. You don't follow trends. You follow truth. You don't seek the spotlight. You carry your own light. And when you walk into a space, darkness recognizes you, not because of who you pretend to be, but because of who you've always been, even when the world couldn't see it. And yes, they're talking now. They're scrambling now, trying to understand how you became so powerful without their validation, trying to piece together the puzzle they ignored for years. But what they don't realize is that you were never trying to prove anything. You were just becoming. You were just aligning. You were just obeying the divine timing that told you, be still for now. But when the moment comes, rise without fear. And now that you've risen, nothing can bring you back to that smaller version of yourself. That era is gone. That mask is gone. That self-doubt is gone. You've seen too much. survived too much, grown too much, and you refuse to dim your light to fit into places that tried to crush your spirit. This is your moment. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. Because you've earned this. You didn't skip steps. You didn't fake your healing. You didn't shortcut your journey. You walked through the valley. You faced the shadows. You learned to love yourself in pieces, and then you gathered those pieces and made a temple out of your brokenness. And now you shine, not because you're flawless, but because you're whole. You're not the quiet mouse anymore. You're the thunder that walks. You're the proof that divine timing is real, that hidden seasons are not wasted, that obscurity is often the birthplace of glory. You're the evidence that what's rooted in God cannot be shaken by man. Let the world talk. Let them speculate. Let them wrestle with the reality that the one they tried to bury has bloomed into something they can't ignore, that the one they left out has become the one they now secretly follow, that the one they once mocked is now the one walking in mercy, favor, and undeniable strength. But don't be distracted by their noise. Stay anchored in your knowing. Stay grounded in your purpose. Keep walking like you know angels are assigned. To your feet. Keep speaking like heaven itself backs your voice. Keep shining like your light was paid for in tears, in silence, in solitude, because it was, and it was worth it. This world didn't give you your power, so it can't take it away. And as long as you stay aligned, no weapon formed against you will prosper. They may try, they may plot, but you've been sealed, you've been covered. You've been chosen, so walk boldly, love fiercely, live fully, and never again question whether you're enough. You were more than enough in the wilderness, you're more than enough in the spotlight, and you'll be more than enough wherever God sends you next. You're not just rising, you are the rise. You're not just awakening, you are the awakening. You're not waiting for the shift, you are the shift. Let them wonder, let them talk, let them try to figure you out. You've already figured out the only thing that matters, who you are in God, and with that knowing, you'll never be underestimated again. You were never created to be average. The very blueprint of your soul was carved in divine excellence. Everything about you, from your resilience to your discernment, was shaped by a higher hand. And while they tried to reduce you to a role, box you into their labels, and limit your shine to the corners of convenience, you were always something far greater. Not because of ego, but because of essence. Because the breath of the Almighty flows through you, and it shows. Not in loud words, but in the way you carry yourself, in the way you love, in the way you endure and still rise. Now they see it. Now they're watching, and they don't quite know what to do with it, because you no longer dance to their rhythm. You no longer shrink in their presence. You no longer ask for permission to be the full, powerful, radiant soul you were always meant to be. And while they scramble to adjust to the version of you that refuses to be small, understand this. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your glow. They had their chance to see you, to honor you, to walk with you in truth. But many chose to mock, to manipulate, to control. Not because you were weak, but because they feared the power they sensed in you long before you did. They didn't just misunderstand you, they were terrified of what would happen if you ever saw yourself clearly, if you ever realized the magnitude of your call, the fire you hold, the destiny that's been chasing you through every valley, every heartbreak, every betrayal. And now that you know who you are, everything has changed. You don't walk into rooms the same way, you don't absorb opinions the same way, you don't move through life trying to be tolerated. You stand firm knowing you were appointed. You're not begging to be chosen. You already are chosen, not by people, not by trends, but by God. And what heaven selects, man can't deselect. You are not a phase. You are not a trend. You are a force, one that walks in silence but carries the weight of heaven in your words. One that was once counted out but is now counted on. You're the shift they didn't expect, the elevation they can't explain. The living testimony that grace isn't about perfection, it's about perseverance. That favor isn't about being flashy, it's about being faithful. You don't have to prove your worth. You already proved it when you didn't give up, when you kept loving after being betrayed, when you kept giving when all they did was take, when you kept believing, even when your heart was heavy and your eyes couldn't see the promise. That's what makes you unstoppable. You didn't quit. You endured, and endurance births glory. Let them talk. Let them question. Let them replay every moment they missed it. That's not your burden. Your job isn't to make them comfortable with your transformation. Your job is to walk in alignment, to stay grounded, to keep rising, because every step you take now is a declaration that purpose cannot be erased by perception, that what God ordained will still rise even if buried. You are no longer the person who second guesses. You are no longer the one afraid of outgrowing environments. You've learned that elevation often means isolation, that not everyone can go where you're going, and you've made peace with that. You've released the need to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding anything that doesn't fit their limited view. Because your calling is not up for debate. Your value is not up for negotiation. This is your time to walk in fullness. No more half-light, no more dimming for the comfort of those who never had the capacity to hold you. No more waiting for applause that was never meant for you. The assignment is clear, the path is sacred, and your feet were made for this ground. Every moment you were overlooked was a seed planted in silence. Every time they mocked your name, heaven wrote it down as evidence. Not because you needed revenge, but because justice in the kingdom isn't about payback, it's about placement. And now you're being positioned, elevated, revealed, not for attention, but for assignment. You've been trusted with influence because you've been tested with affliction. You've been trusted with clarity because you walked through confusion. You've been trusted with authority because you learned how to serve in silence. That's why your rise is different. It's not sudden, it's sacred, it's not shallow, it's rooted, it's not loud, it's luminous, and there's no going back. The version of you that settled is gone. The version of you that begged for love is gone. The version of you that tolerated disrespect in the name of loyalty is gone. What remains is the refined soul, the chosen vessel, the light bearer, the quiet thunder, the one who isn't shaken by storms but walks with them, the one who doesn't beg for doors to open but carries the key. You are a gatekeeper now, a breaker of chains, a restorer of ancient ruins, a warrior whose scars are proof that survival was never the goal. Transformation was. You're not just alive, you're awakened, fully, unapologetically, eternally, and the most beautiful part, you didn't lose your heart in the process. You didn't let bitterness win. You didn't let darkness define you. You let it shape you, yes, but never own you. You let it strengthen your voice without hardening your soul. And now that voice has become a trumpet in the spirit, a sound that calls others into remembrance, a vibration that awakens sleeping destinies. You are not just walking for yourself anymore. You are paving paths for others who will one day say, because they rose, I knew I could too. This is legacy. This is divine leadership. This is what happens when God breathes on a life and says, go forward, no matter who follows. You don't need the crowd. You don't need their echo. You have the confirmation from the Most High, and that's enough. The oil on your life can't be copied. The favor on your life can't be earned through performance. It's grace. And grace will take you places your name hasn't even reached yet. So walk boldly, chosen one, even when the road is lonely, even when the whispers grow loud, even when the old version of you tries to call you back into safety. Keep walking. You are not returning. You are not retreating. You are reigning. This is the hour when everything aligns, not because it's easy, but because you are ready, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. You are no longer shaken by the chaos around you. You've become the calm in the center of the storm. You've learned to walk with God in the dark, so now you carry the light, and that's why the enemy fears you now, because you know who you are, not just on the surface, not just when you're affirmed, but even in silence, even in solitude, even when no one is clapping. You still rise, you still speak truth, you still carry presence. Because you are the presence. The glory doesn't just surround you, it flows through you, and wherever you go, things will shift, people will awaken, chains will break. Not because you're forcing anything, but because you've become undeniable. So, keep moving, keep trusting, keep aligning. Don't let comfort seduce you back into containment. Don't let old labels become new limits. Don't let tired minds talk you out of your fresh oil. You are not who you were. You are not what they said. You are who God has always known you to be. Powerful, purposeful, protected. And now, you're walking into spaces that once rejected you with a grace that cannot be denied. A peace that cannot be touched, a voice that cannot be muted, a spirit that cannot be manipulated. This is your era of divine embodiment. You are no longer chasing healing. You are healed. You are no longer searching for identity. You are rooted. You are no longer begging for favor. You carry it. You are not the quiet one anymore. You are the voice of truth. You are the sound of destiny. You are the evidence that divine timing never fails. And now that you've arrived, walk like you've been sent. Because you have. You didn't come this far by accident. Every tear, every silent prayer, every moment you questioned your worth, it was part of something sacred. Something heaven was building inside you long before you could see it for yourself. You were never just surviving. You were being forged. Every struggle became the fire that purified your character. Every closed door redirected you to something far greater. And every rejection, that wasn't loss. That was divine redirection. Because what's meant for you cannot miss you, not when you're chosen. There's a reason you felt different. A reason why the noise of this world never sat right in your spirit, why shallow conversations never satisfied your depth, why you were never content to follow the crowd or blend in for safety. It's because your soul was wired for truth, designed for destiny, marked for greatness that defies logic. And that kind of soul doesn't settle. It aches until it aligns. It wrestles until it's refined. It wanders until it remembers where it came from and who sent it. You were sent, not born just to exist, but to awaken. Not to go with the flow, but to be the current that moves mountains. Not to live in fear, but to walk in radical faith. You didn't crawl through valleys of shadow just to hide in the background. You didn't cry yourself to sleep at night just to live a life of mediocrity. You didn't spend years misunderstood, overlooked, underestimated, just to dim your light once you finally found it. You are the light, the torchbearer, the generational shift, the one sent to break cycles, shatter limitations, and carry a voice that echoes far beyond what the eyes can see. You don't need a title to lead. You don't need a platform to impact. You don't need permission to walk in what's already yours. You are heaven's living proof that broken things still breathe, that rejected things still rise, that hidden things still bloom. They tried to define you by your past, but you were never what you went through. You were what you chose to become. You chose healing when bitterness would have been easier. You chose purpose when giving up felt safer. You chose growth when staying stuck would have required less courage. And that choice, that quiet, private, sacred yes, has changed everything, because your yes wasn't just about you. Your yes broke chains. Your yes opened doors. Your yes gave someone else permission to believe again. That's the kind of impact you carry. You don't always see it. You don't always hear it. But it's real. Every room you walk into, something shifts. Every time you speak truth, something awakens. Every time you choose to rise despite the odds, something in the atmosphere bows to the authority that walks with you. You are not weak for feeling everything so deeply. You're not crazy for caring, even when others seem numb. You are not fragile because you feel pain others refuse to face. You are gifted with divine sensitivity because you see what others miss. You feel what others numb. You discern what others ignore. That's not a burden. That's your brilliance. You were never meant to build your life on noise. You were meant to build it on whispers from God. That's why you were set apart. That's why things didn't happen for you the way they did for others. That's why your path felt slower, harder, lonelier. Because shortcuts were never for you. Copying others was never your portion. You were called to walk a road that required you to become the blueprint, not borrow one, and you did. Quietly, bravely, faithfully, even when no one clapped, even when no one understood, even when all you had was a dream and a whisper in your spirit that said, "Keep going." And now, you're standing in a space that was carved from courage. You didn't stumble here, you were led here, one step at a time, one tear at a time, one breakthrough at a time. There is nothing ordinary about you. You may not have always felt strong, but you've always been strong, because strength isn't about never falling. It's about always getting back up. It's about holding on to your hope when everything around you says let go. It's about choosing to believe there's more, even when you've seen nothing but less. And you, beloved chosen one, are the very embodiment of that strength. You are not behind. You are not late. You are right on divine schedule. Everything you've lived through was necessary for what you're being called to. Nothing was wasted, not the heartbreak, not the silence, not the confusion. It all taught you how to hear God without the noise, how to walk in faith when the path disappears, how to trust timing that doesn't match the clock in your hand, but matches the calling on your life. And that timing, it's unfolding now. Doors are opening that no man can shut. People are being drawn to the light you carry. Resources are flowing to meet your mission. What you need is being released, not because you begged for it, but because you aligned with it. You stopped trying to force it. You stopped trying to prove yourself. And instead, you remembered who you are and who you belong to. And that remembrance, that shift, it opened the floodgates. There's no more room for playing small, no more shrinking to be safe, no more pretending you don't see what you see, feel what you feel, or know what you know. You've been called to rise, to lead, to become, fully, freely, unapologetically. You've spent enough time on the sidelines. Now it's time to step into the fullness of what's always been yours. Your voice is needed. Your perspective is rare. Your heart is pure. Your wisdom is hard-earned. And your journey, your authentic journey, is your ministry. You don't need to be polished to be powerful. You don't need to be perfect to be prophetic. You just need to be present, to show up, to keep showing up, to walk with humility, with fire, with grace. Because that's what chosen ones do. They rise from ashes. They create from pain. They lead with love. They speak with clarity. And they stand with God when the world turns its back. You're not defined by the noise. You are defined by the stillness you've learned to carry inside of it. The stillness that listens before reacting. The stillness that discerns instead of assuming. The stillness that allows your soul to stay anchored even when the storms rage. That stillness is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is power. And it is yours. So breathe deeply now. Feel the shift. Feel the release of everything that tried to keep you small. Let it fall away. The old labels. The old fears. The old stories that said you weren't enough, that you had to earn love, that you had to perform for purpose, let them crumble, because they were never your truth. Your truth is that you are chosen, you are powerful, You are sacred. You are sent, and now you are ready. So rise with every part of your being. Walk like heaven goes before you, because it does. Speak like your voice carries weight, because it does. Love like your heart is protected by divine hands, because it is. Move like every step you take is holy ground, because it is. And don't look back. Don't hesitate. Don't wait for another sign. You are the sign. You are the miracle. You are the living, breathing, walking evidence that what is formed in secret will one day reign in public. This is your time. This is your season. This is your calling. And no one, not them, not fear, not delay, can stop what God has already spoken over your life. Now go. Not to be seen, but to reveal what's already been planted within you, because chosen one, you're not becoming, you've already arrived.